All right, good morning, everyone. My name, if you don't know who I am, my name is Ty Hill. I am the campus pastor at Hamilton Hills Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. For some of you that do know me, you may know me as the scrawny little kid who used to sing Casting Crowns specials from this platform many, many years ago. I think the last time that I got to speak here was my ordination. I didn't put too much thought into that, so I might be wrong, but it's been quite a while. But I'm so excited to get to talk to you this morning and get to share with you what the Lord has put on my heart. And as you see up on the screen, it says The Path. This is a series that my church has been going through, which is all about the concept of the practical side of walking with Jesus and what that actually looks like, which wonderfully lines up a lot with what Justin has been talking to all of you about. So it lined up very nicely, but it's always weird coming. I obviously preach at my church a lot. I've preached at a good handful of other locations as well. It's weird preaching in front of you guys, to be honest, because there's not many people that are active in my life anymore that don't know me as the husband of Kinsey or the dad of my two kids, Corey and Zealand. Many of you in this room are a unique set of people that know me as teenage Ty and kid Ty and the Ty that was very immature and made a lot of mistakes and embarrassed myself on this stage plenty of times, probably more than I can count. And so it's weird to be preaching. It's been a long time since I've preached in front of a group of people that don't truly see me and know me as the grown man that has two kids, that has been living a full life in a different state. But it is so great. I'm so happy to get to be here. This town, Martins Ferry, the Ohio Valley, it formed me in so many ways. There are things that have stuck with me throughout all of this. I don't know, some of the stuff you guys aren't aware of what I put up with in Indianapolis. Those lunatics over there call tacos in a bag walking tacos. It's ridiculous. I get in arguments with my wife all the time because anytime someone has like a campfire in their backyard and sits around the fire and like makes s'mores, they call all of those exclusively bonfires. We're sitting around the bonfire. I'm like, no, a bonfire is a giant stack of wood where you like put a kind of a weird statue of a Bel Air Big Red on, and I don't think you guys do that anymore, which is probably a good thing. When I look as a 33-year-old man and look back, I was like, so are we suggesting that a 16-year-old boy playing for Bel Air High School is on top of that? Because it starts to get weird fast when you start to unpack that. But I'm very, very proud of being here. I've been formed by so many ways, and of course, being formed as a Hill boy, getting to experience and grow up life here. I was always also formed in weird ways. My wife learned quickly that as we started dating, I met her in the Indianapolis area as well, and as we started dating a lot closer, she never understood that like when she would come in for a hug, and she's shorter than me, and so as her hands would come around my side to give me a hug, I would go like this. And if any of you know my Hill family, such as my Uncle Tim or my dad, you've probably been a part of a hug where they grab your side and tickle you or torture you in that way. And my wife just didn't know how traumatized I was by my Uncle Tim tickling me. So this area has shaped me, has formed me. I'm so proud. I'm also proud of the way the Lord has shaped me and formed me by moving to Indianapolis and getting to be a dad now, getting to be a husband now, being a pastor in full-time ministry now for about 13 years. I'm so grateful for the things that I learned here, and so grateful for the things that I've learned since I left and the way that God has built me up. And that is kind of the point of today, this idea of formation. How we are formed, the things that happen to us, whether when we were young or when we were old, the things we're going through now, the things we went through a long time ago. So many things form us in so many different ways. So let me ask you a question. Have you thought about all of the little decisions, not the big decisions, the little decisions in your life that had such a huge impact that you could have never imagined? You made one momentary choice just for a moment, and it changed a little bit, or maybe in a major way, the course of the rest of your life. So I think of like the physical ones are kind of a good example. So for me, I remember one time in high school, I was playing for Martins Ferry High School basketball, and we were playing in Steubenville, and I made the momentary decision to go up for a layup against a man that I think they should have checked his birth certificate because there's no way we were anywhere near the same age, and he absolutely obliterated me. And I fell and rolled my ankle, and from that choice of just looking at this man and saying, yeah, I can probably get a layup past him, and being very, very wrong, to this day, if I'm walking down a sidewalk and I hit like the edge of a sidewalk in any way, shape, or form, my whole leg buckles and it looks like I'm doing a dance, and it's very, very embarrassing. That one choice in a momentary action shifted the way that my body worked for the rest of my life. And then you think of other things. I also have a scar on my right wrist from here to here. And I don't even know if my parents knew this. I'm realizing that in this moment. This scar exists from me climbing the Martins Ferry public pool fence to impress a girl. A lot of blood, covered it up very nicely, and I'm ending the story with that. We will go no further. Choices like that, I now bear a scar for the rest of my life because of choices that I've made. Also, there's the emotional side. When I was a student pastor for a while, and I was trying to really build into the teenagers' minds how big of an impact their choices make. It's always a complicated concept because you're looking at teenagers knowing you're going to make stupid decisions and you're going to be okay. God's going to take care of you, but also that doesn't mean you don't hold responsibility, and when you make mistakes, that's not going to follow you the rest of your life. So one of the ways I would do that is I would pull out a big dry erase board and I would write my name and my wife Kinsey's name, and I would draw branching paths. And especially for Kinsey and I, some of you guys in this room, I know many of you, you grew up in the same area, you went to this school, many of you were high school sweethearts. Kinsey and I are not that. And when you really start breaking down the momentary life decisions that happened over and over and over again, that if I would have chose something different, not only would Kinsey and I have never gotten married, we would have never met. The things that I had to do, I had to go to Kentucky Christian University. There was no other, if I did not go to KCU, I would not have met Kinsey. I had to date a different girl from Kentucky Christian University. I had to date her because she lived in Wabash, Indiana. And when I visited Wabash, Indiana with her family over and over and over again, I learned about this place called White's Residential and Family Services, which is eventually where I heard that they do a lot of residential treatment. And when I was a biblical studies and counseling psychology major, I was looking for a counseling psychology internship, and they offered me an internship, and because it was a Christian organization as well, they offered me to help with their spiritual life formation as well, because it's a Christian organization. So I got to go get my counseling psychology degree internship there, while also getting to step into ministry, because I knew I was going to blend and meld those two. And because I did that, I only found that place because that girl that I was dating at the time, I got that internship. It went great. It went so good that I got my first full-time ministry job as the campus pastor at that residential facility, and got there and thought, oh, this is great. I'm dating this girl here in Wabash. I now have a full-time job. And then we broke up, and then life shifted dramatically. But because of that, about 9 months after working at White's Residential and Family Services, a girl named Kinsey showed up to be a house parent, and I jumped on that so quick, she had no idea what was happening to her. I was buying her cheesecakes to surprise her and throwing everything I knew, all the tricks I had trying to get her attention, and somehow it worked. But all those things that had to happen, including, it's just a silly concept even in my own brain to think about the fact that I had to date a completely separate woman to meet my wife. If I did not date that woman, I never would have met her. And that is something that is so interesting in my brain for all of us to sit here and consider the fact that every choice we make can have forever impact in ways that we can never predict. Now, there are obvious ones that we kind of try maybe to beat into our kids' heads or even ourselves, but the reality is that formation happens every single day with every choice. I feel that heavily as a parent. Today's day and age, I know it's happened throughout history, but being a parent of a 6 and a 4-year-old right now in today's day and age, every choice that you make is under a massive microscope of, oh, you don't send your kids to private school or public school, you're a terrible parent. Oh, you let your kids look at a screen at the dinner table, they're destined for failure for the rest of their life. Every choice that I make, I feel like, is either my child's going to Harvard or they're going to end up a drug dealer, and there's no in between. There's such a pressure and an expectation on everything I do as a parent. And today I want to talk to you about the concept of spiritual formation. Spiritual formation. And this kind of comes from a book. One of my favorite books of all time is a book called Renovation of the Heart by Dallas Willard. It's all about this concept of spiritual formation. And this is how he defines spiritual formation. Spiritual formation is the Spirit spirit-driven process through which your inner self is transformed so that your outward actions naturally flow from the character and teachings of Jesus Christ. Spiritual formations is the forming of your spirit, what's happening in here, not just so that your heart is changed, but so that then it shifts to the outside and how you live your life. And one of the main things that Dallas really beats into your head through not only that book, but really many of his teachings and many of his books, is that spiritual formation is happening every single day at all times. Every single choice we make every single day forms us. Sometimes in massive ways we could have never imagined, and yes, sometimes in very minor, minute ways. But he goes into, John Mark Comer pulls a lot from Dallas Willard's teachings, and he covers a lot of the concept of our individual choices. Like if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you look at is your phone, no shame in the room, I struggle with that too. He says that forms you, that forms your day, that shapes your day, every day when we make that choice. So I want to talk to you about two biblical characters that many of us know and kind of do a compare and contrast. Usually I would just grab a text, say, go to that passage in your Bible, and we would sit in that for a while. But I want to do something a little bit different today. I want to talk about two different people, and we're going to talk about the concept that formation is inevitable. Formation is inevitable. There is nothing you can do to stop yourself from being formed every day. So the question is, how are you going to be formed? So, Solomon and Daniel. And let me tell you, there's about 1,000% chance I'm going to call Daniel David at least 6 times during this sermon. I can't stop myself from doing it no matter how much I practice, so I'm so sorry. So when you hear me say David today, I'm talking Daniel, and I want you all to just nod and act like you understood. Don't laugh. Don't make fun of me. Keep that in your head. You can judge me in there. I'm going to mess it up like 6 times during this. But Solomon and Daniel, 2 people from the Old Testament that came from very, very, very forming environments. So let's start with Solomon over here. If you're not familiar, I'm going to give you a brief overview, kind of like the Sunday school version of his story. Solomon was the son of, okay, wait, now I'm already having to retract. He was the son of David. I meant David when I said David that time. So he was the son of David, King David, the King David. Solomon comes up, he becomes king, and he has this wonderful, magnificent moment where he gets to go before God, and God says, what do you want? And he has, we'll cover this in a moment, an incredibly humble request that God grants that and more. Solomon was an incredibly forming environment because he became king, and he became incredibly wealthy and full of power, and he was in, we all know, like there's all kinds of sayings like absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like we know the concept that when you have a lot, or when you have a lot of power or a lot of finances, that's going to affect your spirit, and it did for Solomon. So he was in a very forming environment. Daniel, on the other side, he was, in his time period, captured by Babylon. When Babylon had taken over, the most powerful empire in that entire millennia took over. Daniel was taken back to Babylon, and he and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were thrust into service in the palace while they were 4 very loyal followers of God, Jewish men. They were thrust into this environment where everything else was going the exact opposite way, and they were directed by people in authority and power over them to say, you're going to do it our way. They changed their names, they changed their homes, they changed their livelihoods, and thrust them into this. Neither one of them could sit in their environment. Not Daniel, who was in this terrible, horrible, scary environment, or Solomon, who was in this wonderful, had all these things going for him. Neither one of them could stay neutral. Neither one of them could stay still at where they were in their life with their walk with God. Solomon, both of these two also were given extraordinary gifts in their own ways. So Solomon is kind of the more famous one. So when we find Solomon at this story, this is how he's presented to us in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 3. It says this: Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given him by his father David. So Solomon believed very strongly in the Lord. He wanted to do it God's way. He wanted to present his life as obediently as possible. It's the exact kind of person you would want to choose to be king in this season. And so God went to Solomon and he said, hey, whatever you ask for right now, because you're such a loyal servant, I'm going to give you whatever you ask. And if you put yourself in that position right now,
you can say, what would you answer the Lord? And some of you have some really pretty answers that I probably wouldn't believe because they'd probably be too polished, be really tempting, be like, you know what, Lord, if you could just pay off my house, that would be great. I would love to never think about my mortgage again. But Solomon said, you know what, I want to be an excellent king, so I would ask that you give me wisdom. And here is what God said to him. I will do what you asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. So he said, listen, I'm going to give you this, and you're going to be so wise. So now Solomon is known as the wisest person that has ever walked to this earth. And there's different stories and examples of how, when he lived this life, when he walked through this life, the choices that he made, the wisdom that he had, that he was able to overlook this entire situation and see court cases and things brought to his attention and how he's able to navigate them with such wisdom. But then on top of that, as king, he was also an incredibly prosperous time where he had so much money, so much wealth, so much power, everything at his disposal. Daniel, on the other side, although he had everything taken from him, he also had a gift from God. In the midst of their knowledge and understanding, or in the midst of their situation, God gave them knowledge and understanding. In Daniel chapter 1, it says it this way. To these four men, so that's Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to these four young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. So both of them get really good gifts. Wisdom, a deep wisdom, the wisest man that's ever lived, and a man was able to have understanding and also be able to interpret dreams, which comes, if you know the rest of the story of Daniel, is incredibly important and bears a lot of weight. So both lived at the intersection of faith and immense worldly power in very different ways. But here's the word that I want you guys to think about, the word drift. Drift. Everybody say drift. Drift. Thank you. Drift. So, have you ever, I guess you can't do it much around here. One of the things that stood out to me most when I moved to Indiana, especially Wabash, Indiana, it's all farms. And when I say it's all farms, I mean it's all farms. And so, when you get on a road, you can drive forever. Straight as an arrow, you can't see anything but corn or beans, depending on which year it is, and just straight ahead. And so I would like to challenge myself every once in a while, just for fun. How steady can I hold the wheel? And just keep it as still as humanly possible without driving off the road. Now, I wouldn't let myself drive off the road. I'm not completely crazy, but I would try to hold the steering wheel straight. You've probably maybe done this on the interstate when you were younger or something like that. Can I stay on for like 15, 20, 30 seconds where I just stay perfectly straight as possible? The reality is, no, you can't. No matter how good of a driver you are, you have to make those adjustments. If you hold that steering wheel perfectly straight, eventually, because of your own imperfections in your arm or the imperfections of the vehicle or the imperfections on the road, you're going to drive into a tree, you're going to drive into a ditch, you're not going to make it very far. The reality is, there has to be little corrections. There has to be little changes. No matter what, when you drive, if you try to drive straight, you're going to drift. And the same goes for all of us. We can't hit a certain trajectory in our life where, man, I've had a really good day. I've been on top of, I've been talking to God. So I'm just going to keep it right here, and I'm not going to budge. I'm just going to keep going in this direction. That's not how life works. Constantly, we are getting bumped and pushed off course. And no matter how straight even you think you are, even if you had a road that didn't have ditches and you could just drive, if you are off just the slightest degree and you drive 5 hours, you're going to end up in a completely different state than you planned. And that's how life works as well. So, when we look at Solomon, Solomon drifted with his environment. When the environment came around him, he drifted with his environment. So, when you look at chapter 11 of 1 Kings, it starts to talk about what happened to Solomon. Solomon, when he got this wisdom and wealth, things went really well for a while, but then he started to just allow little things to enter his life. Sometimes they were fine. Sometimes when you look at them on the surface and you just see, okay, like I get maybe where your brain was going in that direction and I understand. And then some of them we look at, what are you talking about, Ty? You're saying the smartest man that's ever lived was this dumb? That's kind of the concept that can start to creep into your brain. And so in chapter 11 of 1 Kings, it says this. They were from the nations, King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women. That's a great way to start a sentence. Besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidomites, and Hittites. They were from the nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. Let me be very clear. I'm not blaming that on those women. I'm blaming it on the wisest man that has ever lived that saw a direct command from God and said, God, I understand what you're saying. I know the end thing. I would never do the things that you're worried about I'm doing. I'm wise. I'm so discerning. So I know you're saying don't do this because this is what you don't want to happen, but I'm never going to get there. So if I just bend the line a little bit here, I'm good. You know what's a really good physical example of how we do that as human beings every day? There's a lot of laws that take like judges and take Supreme Court and stuff to kind of dissect and figure out who we are and what we believe. And like, okay, what does this law actually mean? What does the phrase is letter of the law? But you know what so many of us do in this room? There is a law out there every day that we face called speed limit. Do you hear that second word there? Limit. Speed limit. And what do? We have all these fun, cutesy, like little phrases like, what is it, like 9, you're fine, 10, you're mine. Like, we're like, okay, the speed limit's 70, but if I go 9, if I go 79, they're not going to pull me over. Oh, but if I go 80, that's the one that they'll definitely pull me over. I saw about 800 cops on my way. I had to drive all the way through the state of Ohio to get here on Memorial Day weekend. So I did not play with that speed limit this weekend. But we as human beings, we love to just like, okay, I understand the concept of a speed limit, 70, but you know what, if I just go a little bit over there, that's fine. That's what Solomon was doing. And so all the vindication me and you are doing in our heart right now about speed limit, I'm like, but Ty, we don't actually care. We're still good drivers. We're wrong. That's what Solomon was doing. He was saying, well, I'm good. I know he doesn't want me to crash and burn and my life fall apart, but just a few more wives and we're good. And somehow he woke up one day and he had 1,000 women at his disposal. The wisest man on earth said, this is a really good idea. And all those things started to bleed into his life and start to change things dramatically. Daniel, on the other hand, he pivoted against his environment. No matter what was happening around him, he pivoted against his environment and to God. Laws pushed and prodded he and his friends. New name, new language, new food, everything pushed him in one direction, and he leaned the other way and refused to budge. It was deliberate. In Daniel chapter 1, it says it in this way: when he was put in a position that they were trying to force him to eat and drink in ways that did not line up in accordance with his Jewish commands and following God. This is what it said. But Daniel resolved, and that Hebrew word is sum. And when it says resolved, it's not like he had a good idea. It was one of those moments that if you've ever had that moment, it's like, come hell or high water, this is the way that I am going. My heels are in, I'm stuck. So he said, no matter what happens, Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank, and he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. So he was like looking at the scenario, and he probably could have convinced himself, listen, I'm going to die, and I can't really, if I just keep disobeying commands, I'm probably going to get killed, and how can I do the Lord's will if I get killed? And he could have found a way to get there that maybe some of us in this room could have understood Daniel and empathized with him for what he was feeling, but he decided he was going to put his flag down in the dirt and say, I'm not budging on these things. If God told me to do them, I'm going to do them. So it comes down to these two words: intentionality and passivity. Intentionality and passivity. Daniel's formation was absolutely inseparable from the practices that he did in his life. One of the main ones, we've all heard, maybe some of you have heard about the Daniel fast, and it's reflective of what we just talked about. When Daniel was told that he had to eat a certain way, had to drink a certain way, he went to the people in authority over him and said, I would ask your permission to allow me to live my life in the way that God asked me to, allow me to eat just fruits and vegetables ahead of me. And I want you to compare us and our health to the people that you let eat the king's food and all these different things. A diet of fruit and vegetables sounds absolutely horrific. I would never participate in a Daniel fast. Good for you if you participated, but he was able to do that. And also the one he was even more famous for that ultimately became what to many seemed to be was going to be his downfall is he had a very strict practice. 3 times a day, every single day, he opened up his window, even when it became illegal, and he prayed. He prayed loudly and openly to God, no matter what was happening. So if you know the story of Daniel, how that started to unfold is there were men who deeply disliked him, but because of his practices, they couldn't find fault in him. As a matter of fact, it says in Daniel 6, Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground or complaint or any fault because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. He was seen as upstanding because of his practices. He kept himself in line, not because he did something magnificent. I'm sure there were other moments that we don't hear about in the book of Daniel where temptation crept in or anything like that, but he had practices in place, things set in front of him that he said, I'm not budging on these things, and I'm going to follow the way. And let me tell you, Daniel's strategy, I don't have one for you that's going to blow your mind. I don't have a whiteboard up here where I'm going to start drawing this whole map where you say, if you do this, and then 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 you do this, and you won't worry about anything and you'll make good choices. I don't have that for you today. Actually, what I want to show you is what Daniel did. The way he stopped himself from drifting spiritually is he went to his father 3 times a day and talked to him. I'm not talking about a magnificent prayer that's well crafted. I'm not talking about a liturgy that you recite every moment. It maybe sometimes was shorter than it was long. Sometimes maybe it was really lengthy. And let me tell you something. It wasn't because he approached his father and he said the magical spell through prayer where everything was okay. Let me tell you something. It's as simple as this. Staying close to God is exactly that. If you take time to form closer to God, if you spend time in conversation with him, you get closer with him. Period, point blank. And let me tell you something that I've learned now in adulthood, that when I was in my 20s and living here and then college and then Wabash, Indiana, and getting married and making all the mistakes that people like in my age range were like making financial mistakes and stressing about every little thing and buying my first house and all this stuff, I would stress like crazy over that. And then over the past couple weeks, I've had insane car problems. It's been one of those, seasons where like literally one day in particular, I picked up my wife's car from the shop, went home, grabbed the other car, took it back to the shop that's next door. It just was one of those weeks. And as much as those fun, I got to sit there in the car and reflect. And you know what I thought? Wow, I'm not freaking out right now. And that kind of sounds like I was puffing myself up like, oh, I'm a man now. I don't worry about things. No, I actually felt God give me this peace and assurance. This isn't a tap on my, because I'm telling you, I had crippling anxiety about money for a long time. I learned that because I'm close to the Father, because I talk to him daily, all of a sudden these things that should feel scary and crippling don't feel so scary and crippling. I haven't cracked the code. It's not because I have it all figured out. It's because I stay close to the Father and I remember who my Father is, and then all these problems seem really small. That's how Daniel avoided drift. He stayed close to his father. So when the king's men came to him and said, we made a new law that now if you pray to anybody but King Nebuchadnezzar, you are going to be eaten alive by lions. Daniel said, lions? Do you know who I'm talking to 3 times a day? Daniel wouldn't have felt that way if he wasn't talking to God. We forget about the big power and the mighty nature of and the wonderful love of our Father when we don't talk to him. When we kind of naturally just accidentally drift away, all of a sudden our problems seem so big. But guess what? When you're standing next to your Father holding his hand, everything's a little bit more okay. You're like, oh, lions? What are you talking about? Financial instability? Do you know the ways that my God has provided for me over the past couple of years? Now, Solomon was the opposite. He drifted downward, and it noticeably happened because he didn't have those practices in his life. The book of Ecclesiastes happens, and you look through it, and it's basically a big science experiment from Solomon where he says, I'm going to try all of these things, see how it works out for me, and it's going to be great. And he starts, and guess what? How's the book start? Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless because the things that Solomon started to let into his life caused the drift that made his life totally and completely fall apart. The nation that he inherited began to totally and completely split into 2 because of the things that he slowly left. It's kind of like how marital affairs happen. No one wakes up one day and says, I have resolved to cheat on my wife. No, it usually happens in the fights and the disrespectful talk to one another and spending less time together and realizing how quickly that can pull you apart. Kinsey and I realized quickly after we had kids how easy it is for her and I to drift apart. You're traveling to all these things, these little gremlins are just constantly needing more and sucking the life out of you. And Kinsey and I found that there was a certain year in our life that we're only 8 years into our marriage. So don't hear me that I'm like some abounding in wisdom, but I can bookmark you the year where it was really hard for us to be on the same page. We were short with each other, we struggled, and then every once in a while, thank God, we would have a grandma or a Grammy or somebody step up and say, hey, can we watch the kids so you guys can go on a date night? And I'm telling you, 15 minutes into our date night, and we would literally joke like, oh, I forgot that I liked you. Like I forgot that I enjoyed spending time with you. That's how, just like drift happens in marriage, it happens in our lives as well. Solomon ended his story with his character completely out of whack, completely falling apart, completely messing up. Daniel ended his story with his character intact. And it wasn't because what one did have and what didn't. They put the practices in their life in certain ways. Daniel said, I'm going to put my foot in the ground and stand by these principles that God has asked me of. And I'm not going to budge on those things. Daniel said, I'm going to keep these practices in my life so I stay close to my father. Solomon had the best of intentions. He was a good man, the exact kind of king you wanted. But he kept slowly letting these things creep in that pulled him slowly and slowly and slowly away from his father. The same can happen to you and me. And I want to put these two words in front of you: trying and training. There's a guy named Craig Groeschel, a famous Christian pastor, and he has a book where he talks about this concept, and he defines them as these two ways. Trying is the attempt to do something right by effort in the moment. That's a good thing. Trying to do something in the moment. That's something that we can all strive to do. When something's in front of us, yes, you should try, but there's a difference between trying and training. If I go over to the Family Life Center and I'm going to try to dunk, I sure can try. And I'll embarrass myself in front of all of you, but there's a whole other thing, even though I don't think I could do it now, is if I put training effort into that, then we're having a different conversation. It's the same thing that if someone struggles with alcoholism, should they try to not drink alcohol by hanging out with their friends at the bar? No. There should be a training in effect and an expectation that our spirits are weak and that we will fail, and so we put things in our life. So training is the commitment to develop habits that equip you to do the right thing in the moment. So here's what I want to challenge you with today as we depart. Your relationship with God is never neutral, no matter who you are. If you're a young person in this room that just recently got baptized, that's a spiritual high like none other. You're ready to take on the world. You're ready to fight the devil himself. If he showed up, you put your gloves on and go to town, right? And that is a beautiful moment. But you never, I wish you could just get there and I could like put a stamp on your forehead and say, there you are. You're going to have this feeling for the rest of your life. That's not how it works. There's going to be trials and tribulations and hardships and heartbreak and so many things that try to steal your joy and try to steal your happiness. And sometimes that thing is going to win. On the other side, in my years in ministry and growing up in the church, every single church has this: grumpy old people. Every church except Martins Ferry First Christian Church had. There's always a few people that have been in the church like double or triple my lifespan. And I mean this with all the respect. I'm talking about those specific people, not the elderly in general. Those specific people, and you know them too, whether you admit it or not, where they are 70, 80, 90 years old. They've been sitting in that pew for that 70, 80, 90 years, and they are miserable, not kind people. And I think a lot of times in my life, I gave them a pass of like, life is hard, life is long. When bodies kind of break down a little bit, it just gets harder, and they've had to deal with a lot more heartbreak. But here, in my life, I've actually come up with a theory. And this is one of those things I'm going to step on someone's toes in here, and you're going to think, oh, that little 16-year-old Ty's got something to say. I'm not 16-year-old Ty anymore. Hear me as a pastor that's been doing this for a while, and I've witnessed it. Is that also on the other side, I think sometimes that 60, 70, 80-year-old person that's grumpy and mean and unkind is because they hit a point in their life in their spiritual walk with Jesus, and they stopped. I've got there. I've hit the moment. I've hit the point, and I don't have to go any further. And guess what happens? That's not how it works. If you aren't actively trying to grow closer to the Lord, you're going to get more bitter. You're going to get more unkind. And I'm not preaching at the old people right now. I'm preaching at the young people that also just made these decisions, that you have never hit a point, and you don't get to look at anybody in a different season of life. You don't get to look at a 40-year-old person if you're 16 years old and go, I'll never be like that person. That's not how it works. That every day we make the choice, am I going to go closer to my Father in heaven or not? And we're all going to fall, and we're all going to make mistakes, but the reality is no matter what your age is, whether you're a 13-year-old that just got baptized or whether you're an 80-year-old that gave your life to Jesus 60 years ago, it doesn't matter. You need to be close to your Father in heaven today. I think that was the legacy of my grandma. My grandma Dorothy, who sat right back there in that pew, she was someone who stayed close to her father every single day. She prayed to him constantly. She would interrupt. You would be mid-conversation with her, and she would interrupt you to talk to Jesus. And I'd be like, excuse me, I'm standing here. But she would keep going. My grandma would interrupt me and my friends to lay hands on my face when I was a teenager and pray over my acne and just traumatize me in front of all my friends. She was close to her, and many of you who met her, you knew that the first time you met her, she loved you because she was close to her Father in heaven. So my challenge to you is the reminder from these two verses. In Romans chapter 12, it says this, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing. That's a constant verb that keeps happening. By the renewing of your mind, then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And then 1 Timothy 4 says this, have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. That is why we labor and strive, because we have put our hope in the living God, who is the Savior of all people, especially of those who believe. Listen to me. Being a follower of Jesus, being in relationship with God is not like riding a bike. You can't just pick it up and always just know exactly how. You're not going to be riding your bike the rest of your life. It takes work and constant. I'm not going to give you a list of practices of, hey, by this time next year, by Memorial Day next year, you better have read your whole Bible twice. I don't have something like that for you. But the challenge I do have for you is you need to be close with your Father. You need to make sure that you're bringing your decisions before Him. I don't care what age you are. I don't care what life choice you're in. That right now, every day, you're being formed in one direction or the other. But the great thing is, none of that is scary in the sense of, my life is over, I've made too many bad decisions. What we have is a Father that meets us exactly where we are. And when we've fallen on our face, and when we're covered in mud and dirt, and not mud and dirt from other people, mud and dirt from the silly decisions that we've made that we're like, I can't believe I'm going to God with this again. Every single time He meets us right there and says, all right, let's get back to work. I love you. I forgive you. I'm not done with you. And so I don't care if it's someone in this room that needs to go before God about how they talked to their wife this morning. I don't care if it's someone this morning that made some significant life-altering, horrible, sinful decisions just this weekend. Right now before you, God, you go to Him and say, God, I'm giving this over to you. I'm asking for forgiveness. Help me shift my life back on trajectory to you. There may still be long-lasting consequences of choices we made, but He meets you right there, and He has never, ever, 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 ever done. The potter is so good at always molding the clay. That's what we get to remember. If He's the potter and I'm the clay, even when it mars in His hand, like in the book of Jeremiah, He gets right back to work. Things might look different, it looks just as beautiful, and His story never ends. So as you look at your own heart and your own spirit, and as I close us in prayer here, I want you to be thinking about the things in your life that you need to adjust. Some of us, we're about to go hard into a ditch, and you need to grab that steering wheel and go, and really hit that hard. Some of us have just let a few things slip into our life, not our wife. And we have to make that adjustment ever so slightly, just that nudge to make sure we stay back on course. So, would you pray with me?